10-Minute Murder contains depictions of actual crimes. What you are about to hear is real and violent in nature. Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. I'm Joe, I'm the host, and thanks for being here. If you are brand new to this podcast and you have not subscribed to it, do that now. First of all, I appreciate you checking it out today. Hope you'll come back in the future, and in order to make sure that you don't miss any in the future, you can subscribe. So go ahead and do that when you get a chance to. Also, while I'm in the inviting mood, that sounds whatever, but you know what I mean. You can connect with 10-Minute Murder on Facebook and Instagram. Links for that are in the show notes of this episode, or you can just type it right into the search bar in either of those apps, and it'll pop right up. On those, I post visuals that go along with the stories that you hear about. It's nothing gross or graphic, but it's enough for you to put a face to the names that you are hearing about. The story today is one that was a suggestion emailed to me by Annie and Jared. They're a couple of super nice people that say they've been sharing this podcast with all their friends, which I strongly appreciate, a whole bunch. And actually, you know what? I'm going to treat Annie and Jared to a nice dinner at Applebee's. Now, I'm not going to be paying for it, and I'm not actually going to be there, but you guys go, have a nice time. And FYI, they make a really good Caesar salad. Okay, so the story they asked me to devote an entire episode to is James Holmes and the Aurora, Colorado theater shooting. And just an FYI right out of the gate, everyone has trouble saying certain words, and one of those for me is Aurora. I can say it if I focus up for a second, but if I say it wrong, don't hold it against me. In July of 2012, lifelong mental illness and extreme behavior came to a head for James Holmes. He planned and carried out an attack on theater goers at a midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises. Hundreds of people were there, excited to see the Batman sequel, with some even dressed up for the occasion. One of those being the shooter, who had dyed his unkempt hair bright orange. Before the movie was finished, he had injured 70 and killed 12 people. James Holmes was born in 1987 in San Diego, California, to two very smart and successful parents. His father was a scientist and mathematician with several degrees from elite colleges. His mother, a registered nurse. And if you aren't familiar with the process and education that it takes to become a nurse, it's not even remotely easy. Some of the smartest people I know are nurses. They all have a super dark sense of humor, and they're also always trying to diagnose you, but they are extremely smart. People around James began to notice a decline in his mental health around middle school. It was very obvious that he needed help after a suicide attempt when he was just 11 years old. James said that during his childhood, he was constantly frightened of what he called nail ghosts. He described these apparitions he saw as dark shadows that would hammer on the walls at night. He also saw flickers of things in the corners of his eyes, like out of his peripheral vision, of the shadows fighting each other, sometimes shooting at each other with guns. Later on, his psychiatrist said that he was depressed and obsessed with killing for over a decade. Despite his struggles with mental illness, James Holmes was able to graduate in 2006 and went on to get a bachelor's degree from UC Riverside. After that, he decided to move to Colorado and study for a graduate degree. In Aurora, James lived in a one-bedroom apartment full of other students also attending the University of Colorado. On his apartment application, there was a section asking to describe himself, and James wrote, "quiet and easygoing." While in Colorado, he was active on several dating apps, listing himself as agnostic. According to some people, James was also active in online prostitution message boards, which I didn't know was a thing, but apparently it is. And James not only purchased services using these boards, but also left reviews. And I wish I was making that up. Working as an intern writing computer code at a biology research institute, his supervisor described him as stubborn and socially inept. He did eventually start dating someone from his biology class. That lasted about 2 months. She said he felt distant and would often make jokes that were not funny. but made everyone else feel uncomfortable. He also talked a lot about killing people. She said she didn't take it seriously, but she did tell him that he needed to seek professional help. He took that advice and sought treatment in 2012. During that time, a social worker wrote, "This is the most anxious guy I've ever seen, and he has symptoms of OCD, but most concerning is that he has thoughts of killing people, though I don't think he's dangerous." He was also seen by a psychiatrist named Dr. Fenton, who later testified that she was worried about his thoughts of homicide. She saw him 7 times over 3 months, and he rejected the suggestions for treatment. She listed specific concerns, such as his long-standing fantasies about killing as many people as possible, his reluctance to discuss any details about his plans, his refusal to allow them to talk to anyone else, and the unclear timeline. She didn't know if he was always that way or if this was a new behavior. She consulted with his mother, who said he had long-standing social problems. His final diagnosis there was schizoid personality disorder. On July 20th, 2012, James Holmes entered the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises at Century 16 Multiplex in Aurora, with a ticket he had purchased in advance 12 days earlier. He was wearing baggy pants, a shirt, and a skull cap. He entered and sat on the front row. He pretended to take a phone call, stood up, and left the theater through an emergency exit. Those doors go directly to the outside and lock behind you, so he used a plastic doorstop to keep it from fully closing. He walked to the trunk of his car in the parking lot, where he had what looked like police riot gear. He put on the Black Hawk Urban Assault Vest, a helmet, and gas mask, grabbed an assault rifle, handguns, a shotgun, and re-entered the theater about 18 minutes into the movie. He started by tossing a tear gas canister into the 415-seat room and fired a couple of shots in the air. While people panicked and scrambled around in the dark, James Holmes opened fire with a shotgun. After that, he switched to the AR-15 style rifle with a high-capacity clip, but that gun jammed. He also fired several shots with a Glock handgun. The first of many calls came into 911 at 12:39 a.m., reporting explosions and 10 to 20 shots fired. When police arrived 1 minute later, because the station was very close by, they found a gruesome scene. Blood and popcorn littered the floor, smoke and lingering tear gas in the air. 10 people lay dead in the theater. Another 2 were later pronounced dead at the hospital. 6 minutes after the first 911 call was answered, James Holmes was in custody. He was taken standing beside his car without resistance. Inside his car, police found more weapons and a spike strip. He later said that he was planning to use the spike strips if he was chased by police while fleeing in his car. Back at the station, when interviewed, James told detectives that his apartment was booby-trapped with explosives. They responded by evacuating the 5 buildings around the apartment. Inside, they found more than 30 homemade hand grenades, as well as a device wired to the front door that would explode upon opening. Also, 30 gallons of gasoline in the kitchen. In total, 82 casualties were reported, 70 of those hit by bullets, 4 injured by tear gas, and 8 hurt while trying to flee the theater.
When he came in, you saw him almost immediately.
Yeah, I think I was the first person to see him, and I told my girlfriend to get down right when he was throwing the canister, and he was head to toe in gear, and I figured if he was SWAT, they would yell something, or people would come with him.
So the fact that he was alone raised your suspicion?
Yeah, and he was straight stoic. He didn't do anything, just stood there, threw the can, and then shot in the air.
Where were you, and what did you see?
I was on the front left. He was on the front right. So when he came in, I saw him just sort of stroll up and toss the canister, and he went over the crowd behind me, and I knew it was some sort of irritant, or because my eyes started burning as soon as he let go of the canister.
So you instantly started to feel it?
Yeah, we got out pretty quick, but he started shooting right after he threw it. He started shooting into the crowd and near exits. And
were you able to see him in his eyes, his face at all? Because when you wear a gas mask, it pretty much covers your whole face. Because the police are saying his hair had been dyed red because he called himself the Joker to them.
We could see the I could see the plexiglass of his face of the mask, so I could tell where his But it was really dark, and I saw him pull out. I wasn't sure what kind of gun it was until it went off, and then it was really loud, so I assumed it was a shotgun to start.
Did you actually see people getting hit?
I could see, because I covered my girlfriend. I got her in the ground and I was covering her. So I was on top of her, so I was slightly elevated, and I could see the people behind us scrambling, and he was just firing into them. People were stopping and moving.
So you could see people in the back of the theater?
Yeah, I could see everybody. I could see the whole theater. And people were crawling and frantically trying to get over, and then some people weren't moving, and I thought, they could have just been laying there. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we saw everybody.
There was a time, too, where you were actually in the aisle and he was in the aisle, right?
Yeah. I was trying to count the bullets, and I didn't help at all. But he stopped shooting long enough for me to look up, and I saw he looked like he was reloading. So I tried to get my girlfriend to come with me with the two girls in front of us, because I was the third aisle seat in. I couldn't get them to move. So I thought she jumped the seat with me, and I jumped it, and I ran the aisle, and I looked back, and I guess she couldn't make it over. And I saw him just look at me, and I was reloading, so I ran out to the exit.
He actually looked at you while he was reloading, or in your direction?
Yeah, I looked at him, and pretty sure he was looking in my direction.
When he threw the canister, it was just dead quiet. And then as soon as he started firing, there was screaming everywhere, and I heard somebody screaming that from the area he had shot, and it sounded like somebody was freaking out about somebody getting shot right next to them. And that's when we ducked onto the floor and we started crawling out.
After jury deliberations, Holmes was found guilty on 24 counts of first-degree murder, 140 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 1 count of possessing illegal explosives, and a sentence enhancement of a crime of violence. The 2 murder convictions for each death were first-degree murder or attempted murder after deliberation, and first-degree murder or attempted murder with extreme indifference. After jurors failed to reach a unanimous decision over sentencing him to death, James Holmes was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That's today's 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Thank you for listening today. If you have a story you'd like for me to possibly look into to cover on an episode of 10-Minute Murder, like Jared and Annie did, you can email it to me, 10minutemurder@gmail.com. You can easily connect with this podcast on social media. Just click the links in the show notes of this episode, or even easier, just type 10-Minute Murder into Facebook or Instagram. And yes, I do have a Twitter also. I almost never post anything on Twitter because I don't know what the reason is. There's no real good reason that I don't post anything on Twitter. I just don't. I respond to messages on there, but I just don't post that much on there. I need to do better on that. Be better, Joe. Before you go, subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening right now, and you'll never miss another episode in the future. If you have friends that are into brief true crime stories like this one, let them know about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.